I'd like to call the board meeting to order, and we'll start with the flag pledge led by Commissioner Kolars today.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and I'd also ask to remind commissioners in gallery to silence your cell phones, please. And you have an agenda addition before you, and I'd entertain a motion for approval of the agenda with the amendments.
It's for the consent agenda.
For the consent
For the
agenda.
consent agenda.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second.
And Chair Kemp, we're removing probation, passport user agreement.
Okay.
Do you need a separate motion, Mr. Chair?
I'll accept it as long as no one contests it.
That was my original intent.
I thought so. I was confident that would be your intent. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. I see no one for introduction of new employees. Is that correct? HR Director? I see a bob of the head. We have before you the consent agenda as amended. I'd entertain a motion for same.
So moved.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. I'd entertain public appearances. I see faces that I'm predominantly familiar with, and I see no one. First call for public appearances. Second call for public appearances. Third call for public appearances. Absent that, we will continue on our agenda. Property services. Good morning, Mandy.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Fabulous. I hope everyone else is too.
And you have, I believe, one item for us today.
I do. I have one item for you in regard to the ABMP low interest loan project. I have two parcel letters requesting approval for the lien attachments. The loans total in the amount of $27,680, and this would finish out the year for our loan program. And what I'm asking for is approval of the resolution that's within your packet.
So moved.
We have a motion for the resolution.
Second.
We have a second. Any questions? Hearing none, call the question.
Commissioner Lutfi?
Yes.
Commissioner Kolars?
Yes.
Commissioner Morrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Journal? Yes. Chair Kemp?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good holiday.
Thank you. You all too.
Thank you.
And since we are not discussing the pass point issue, correct? And so then, human resources, we have a public hearing for the fee schedule.
No, but
yeah.
public hearing's at 9:30.
Did I jump?
Yeah.
Oh, that was public hearing,
We have to
excuse
wait.
me.
Yep.
I will come back to that then. We have some items for the elected, those, yeah, none of those are public hearings, so.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First item today, annually at the December meeting, I present a resolution for compensation for our elected officials and department heads and per diem rate. Attached is a resolution proposing a 2.5% wage increase for county commissioners, and then up to a 3.5% wage increase for elected department heads, with per diem rates staying at $70 a day.
I'll move the resolution.
we have a motion. I'll second it for discussion. Discussion.
Mr. Chair, I know this is late in the game and maybe it can be discussed into the future years. I shared with Administrator Crush yesterday some of our neighboring counties and what their per diems are. And I know we've had this discussion with the county attorney about what per diem means. In some counties it means something else than it means here. But I just would like to highlight that Blue Earth County is $75 per diem, Faribault County 80, and another LeSueur County is 75 for a half day, 100 for full days meetings. So I would just ask that in the future, as we've done from time to time, I think it's been a couple of years since we've done some comparison, noting that we consider in the future a $75 per diem for meetings. As always, folks who don't want to accept that, if it is approved by a board, would not need to accept it and could write in their own amount for the future, as per just discussion for future consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner Kolars. I too would, in looking at the memo in regard to this, I think it might be prudent for us to revisit our elected officials' base rates also, because it has been a period of time since we've done the surveying. So I think maybe an objective for 2020 would be to review all of those issues and make that a part of an ongoing recommendation. And if you'd be willing to serve on that committee, we could maybe do that.
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, we've talked about this in passing. I think Dave Dean was here the last time those numbers were adjusted.
Okay.
The late commissioner. We've talked about, what is our budget for next year, 43?
45 million.
45 million. If you look at a typical organization of 45 million, and you say that the CEO of the company gets paid 1%, well, that's 450,000 for the decision makers. At a 0.5%, that would be 275. You can do the math divided by 5. Or 300. That's
225.
225.
Do you have a question?
Mhm.
Comment, please?
Mhm. Thank you. And Commissioner Kolars, I appreciate what you said, that even if this board sets a per diem amount, an individual commissioner can choose to accept all, part, or none. And the same thing with a salary increase, all, part, or none.
Yes, sir.
I will just add, it's okay.
Please.
To Jack's position is, there's a lot of spots that I go where there is no per diem because I'm not on the committee. And I think all of us do that. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. All those in favor signify by, oh, I'm sorry, this is a resolution. So call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Chair Kent?
Yes.
Lupke?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yep.
Fuller?
Yes.
Thank you. You have your next item?
Next item is the 2020 tax levy resolution. On December 5th, the board held our public comment meeting, formerly known as the Truth and Taxation meeting, and presented the 2020 proposed budget and tax levy. The proposed levy shows a 5.25% increase. Most of the increase is related to 3.5 full-time equivalent staff additions. 2.5 of those in Health and Human Services, 1 in Technologies. And then we also had a 10% health insurance increase, which is on the higher end of what we typically see. So that led to a 5.25% increase, which is about 1% over our 10-year average. But we are, in comparison to this region of the state, still below what most counties are showing for next year. What that equates to is 33% of the overall tax burden is paid for from ag land, 15% is commercial and industrial, and 52% is residential. We had a 2.3% growth in market value for the county, so that helps absorb roughly half of that total tax levy increase. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'm recommending that we approve the board approves the tax levy at $23,092,072.
Entertain a motion for the resolution, unless you have questions directly of Administrator Crowe.
I will move it. I was hoping we could do it for less, but I think we did our best to keep it where it is.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I
Please.
want to give credit to our finance committee, budget committee, including yourself and Commissioner Lipke, and the review that you have brought to it. The process that Administrator Crush brings to us has been very descriptive of how we go about it. I might mention that one of the other boards that John and I have been talking about that we serve on in Mankato had a 30% increase in their health insurance, so that could have been even worse. So we're trying to manage this financially and move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Kohler. Anyone else? Seeing none else, call the question, please.
Lipke?
Yes.
Kohler?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Next item, Mr. Chair, is the 2020 budget resolution. It's included in your packet. It presents a total county budget of $45,695,510. That is up about $2.8 million from 2019. Most of that increase of $2.8 million is in capital projects. Of the total, $23 million is tax levy, which you just approved, with the balance of $22,600,000 coming from state, federal, and other funding sources.
These are the numbers that we discussed and were the numbers that were presented at our budget hearing for public input, of which I would note we had no one from the public was present at that, but we did do the full presentation, and these numbers are consistent with that. I'd entertain a motion for a resolution unless there are any questions.
I'll move the resolution.
We have a motion.
Second?
We have a second. Any other discussion or questions?
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Please.
Under revenues, taxes, wheelage, and additional sales tax, that 1.87 million, is that better than we were projecting when we made those decisions a couple of years ago?
It is actually, Commissioner. We just received our final receipts here for 2020. Now, I'm not sure how it'll exactly balance out, but it's I sent it to you, Seth, 1.5 million in sales tax.
I think it was little over 1.3.
Okay, 1.3, which is higher than we projected. We originally projected about 850 to 900,000.
That's what I recall, yeah.
And then wheelage tax has been 40,000 over what we projected. So those revenues are starting to add up now that we're a few years into that, and they, on our financial statement, get set aside for future road projects.
That kind of surprises me with the Shopko closing.
Yeah.
We had talked about the effect of that.
Yeah.
Because we really don't have a major retailer in Nicollet County.
Yeah, 2018 was our first year of collections of sales tax, and in 2019 we were ahead of sales tax for 2018. So the economy remains strong in the county, even with the Shopko closing.
Well, the reason, Mr. Chair, if you'll allow me, that I mentioned that is that we still are needing to have the state legislature do work that will bring full, sustainable transportation funding to our county and to our state. It looks like the coming legislature will not have any bills other than possible bonding bills, and I look to Commissioner Morrow to agree with that. But moving forward into the 2021 session, there's going to be a study by AMC, like we did at our past AMC district meetings, on transit only for this coming year, so that those two ideas can be melded together and that there can be one unified voice at the 2021 legislative session. So this wheelage and sales tax is just trying to keep us from getting deeper into a hole. The hole needs to be filled by future legislative action, which I hope that we all can continue to support with great zeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Hearing none, call the question, please.
Commissioner Morrow?
Yes.
Kohler.
Kohlers? Commissioner John?
Yes.
Commissioner Lipke?
Yes.
Chair Kemp?
Yes.
Sorry about the hand signals.
When you say chair comp, does that mean check off or check?
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair?
So
I don't say
fast.
anything, I just point.
I understand.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
9:15 is the schedule for public appearances. Is
Nine.
this a public appearance?
No.
No,
Oh, okay.
we moved on the agenda
Thank you.
because it's not a.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and
If you
keep
would,
going down my list.
let's continue on.
Okay.
For those that are following, we're gonna proceed on because we have portion time for public hearings, so we're gonna continue on with the administration.
Next item is a request from Partners for Affordable Housing to increase their appropriation request. We have been giving that organization $2,500 a year, and they've requested that increase to $5,000 a year. The organization opened a homeless shelter in St. Peter in 2019, and are looking for additional funds to help maintain that facility. Of course, a few months ago we had them at a workshop and they presented on that. In talking to Health and Human Services, they have said that the shelter has been beneficial in helping assist them with delivery of services for their clients as well. And Blue Earth County and the City of Mankato both do contribute to that organization as well. So I would recommend that we adjust that appropriation as a budget amendment in 2020 to $5,000 for Partners for Affordable Housing.
I would move that, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion,
Second.
we have a second. Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Next item is related to a refugee resettlements letter of consent. On September 26, 2019, President Trump issued an executive order requiring state and local governments to provide written consent to the federal government before refugees can be resettled in their jurisdiction. Beginning June 1st of 2020, the order will generally apply to all arriving refugees, including those with family members already living in Minnesota. The governor of the state and the chief executive officer of a local government county are being asked to provide that consent. Minnesota's 5 local resettlement affiliates are contacting counties to reach out in requesting that letter of consent. I have been contacted already by the Minnesota Council of Churches requesting that the letter be provided. From Nicollet County, the executive order establishes an opt-in consent process, so refugees may not be placed in a jurisdiction that if you don't take action on the consent. Attached in your packet is background from DHS on the order and overall refugee settlements in Minnesota. I also included stats for Nicollet County, which you see in the last few years there's hardly been any refugee resettlement here. In fact, in the last 3 years there's only been 12 individuals placed here. And we found out that most individuals now are being replaced to relocate with existing family already here. In the packet then I did include a letter that approves myself to submit a letter of consent to the Department of Human Services consenting to refugee resettlements in Nicollet County per the terms of Executive Order 13888 on enhancing state and local involvement on resettlement.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to approve that, and I have some comments.
I will second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. Commissioner Kolars.
Let me first say that I believe that we are a welcoming community. And I'm sure many in the audience today and among our board members have sourced this question from places like the Washington Post and the Star Tribune and KARE 11 and other entities that have covered this issue. There's no disputing the fact that there is a strong current of anti-refugee sentiment that runs in the rhetoric and in the actions of the current occupants in the White House that seems to be causing, in my view, more discomfort in America than is necessary. For more than 40 years, referral services like Lutheran Social Service, Catholic Charities, Minnesota Council of Churches have been handling and providing refugee referral services to what I call new Americans for housing, for public health, and for public assistance. This executive order putting the decision to America's counties is a sign to further politicize the resettlement of refugees here in Nicollet County, in the state of Minnesota, and across our nation. As we all know, over the past 4 decades, more than 85,000 refugees have been welcomed here in America. A total of 848 new refugees placed in Minnesota during the past fiscal year. And this executive order reduces the number of refugees admitted to the United States to historic lows. Why? Here in our county, our welcomed refugees and immigrants work in a large dairy operation. They work to shingle our homes. In neighboring counties, they work in the food processing plant to keep the economy going. In many cases, they are doing the work that people born here won't do. A friend of mine who works at a elderly care facility in the Twin Cities said, if we didn't have young women from East Africa, we would not be open. So let's be clear, we're talking about new immigrants who have already been vetted by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to be placed here in Minnesota. I'm old enough to remember when white Americans rejected the idea of bringing homeless Vietnamese people to our country 40 years ago, only to learn that those families became some of the most industrious people in their settlement communities. The same is happening today with Guatemalan, Mexican, and Somali families. Why is the current occupant of the White House doing this? Immigrants offer a lot to our local communities. They create businesses. They add to the labor market. And as I've seen personally, and many of us have seen, Vietnamese and Somali families are a net positive to our county, to our state, to our country. We need to provide a welcoming hand of support for these new Americans who arrive in our country from places that are impoverished, war-torn countries. And I believe we need to disabuse ourselves of the hateful rhetoric and actions against refugees which is currently being espoused and acted upon by the current occupant of the White House. We are better than this. My vote is to continue to welcome new refugees to Nicollet County. Welcome these new Americans. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jack. Commissioner Morrow.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Kohlers, I agree with you, though I need to correct you on, I think, one thing. At times you mentioned immigrants. This is about refugees. This is about people who experience extreme hardship due to displacement, war, genocide, severe poverty, loss of family members. And we heard from refugees in our work session recently. We heard about what I believe was a 2-year process to become a refugee and admitted to the U.S. I think we heard about really an exhaustive process, again, to establish that one is a victim of displacement, war, genocide, or the like. Next week, I'll be traveling for the holidays, Commissioner Kohlers. I'll be driving by Plymouth Rock. I'll be going down to see my family. And I believe, as our governor said, that we have room at the inn, and it's consistent with our founding principles that we are an open and welcoming nation for refugees. So I'll be joining you in voting yes.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lipke.
I am planning on voting against this because I think the wishes of my constituents are to vote against it. The other main reason is over 1/3 of our Health and Human Services clients are recent immigrants. So they're kind of overwhelmed. I'd like to see other counties and states take up more of the duty to do this, and I am disappointed with both President Trump and Governor Walz. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, did you have anything, Mary?
No.
I just again, for clarity's sake, want to make sure that everybody understands there is a difference between immigrants and the refugee status.
Yes.
That it's very important that we understand that. And the individuals that end up being placed under refugee status, really by the nature of where they've fled, have no place else to go. They have no safe place. They have no easy way to return back to their community or country of origin due to whatever political strife or ethnic strife there may be within that country, as was pointed out in our work session. So again, I recognize that there are several issues here, but I just want to be very, very clear that this is about that refugee status, which is a very significant minority of those that come to this country, but nonetheless an important part of our community. Would there be anything else? Hearing none, I will call a question.
Kolar,
Yes.
Journal,
Yes.
Morrow,
Yes.
Lippke,
No,
Kent.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One more item. Looks like we got a few minutes here
Yes,
before
before
our
our-
hearing, so we can, I think, get this in. North Mankato Service Building exterior remodel estimate. I attached an estimate to remodel the exterior of the North Mankato Service Building. The estimate sits at about $455,000. It includes a new roof, all new windows, some masonry work, and some painting. The roof is 25 years old and is leaking. We definitely need to take action on that piece of it. Paint and caulking, as I showed you on our road tour, on the windows is coming off, and it's a 25-year-old building, and it's starting to show its age. We have not, other than very basic general cleaning and maintenance, have not done anything to that building in 25 years. This portion of the project, if the board so chooses to bid it in January, would be completed in the spring. This expense is in the budget that you just approved with reserve funds. I also had our construction manager and architect put together an interior estimate just to see where we're at. And as with most projects, the scope of the project has increased from what we originally were thinking, just a paint job and some new flooring. But we started looking at it and decided, well, let's see what it would cost to really retrofit this building to make it a modern workspace that's conducive to our needs, and then really thinking out into the future. So we're now sitting at a total estimate with interior and exterior at about $2 million. We plan to do this project, if so approved, in 2 phases. The exterior piece, which I think there's agreement that we need to do something there, that would be right away, and then I would recommend we have additional dialogue on the interior piece moving forward, because that piece is a lot more detailed and extensive, and quite honestly, I think staff still needs some more time to look at that as well. A couple other options here that I've been thinking about. If the board wants to, we could delay this action a month and have more discussion at our January workshop. Bidding it at the end of February, our construction manager said we should still be fine. The benefit of bidding in January, February is kind of get in first. You tend to get a little better bids. One commissioner did mention to me, what about building a new building? And I started and I started thinking about that more. There would be additional cost. We're at about $200 a square foot right now, which, if we did everything under this proposal, gets us basically a new building other than wiring and bricks and mortar. If you built brand new from the ground up, our construction manager said we'd be at $300 to $325 a square foot. And a 10,000 square foot building, you're looking at $1 million plus of additional costs there.
Does that take into effect selling this property?
No, not yet. So that would be additional, plus the cost of purchasing another property somewhere, minus the cost of what we would get for selling this building, which our assessor has an $800,000 value on this building, land at 135, building at 665. And I have no idea, Commissioner Kolars maybe knows better what the market is for office buildings in North Mankato. You may sit a long time, it may go right, it's, who knows. And I have no idea what we'd pay for land. My one thought though is that if we did build new, more than likely what's gonna happen is we're not gonna build a 10,000 square foot building. We're gonna want a 15, 18,000 square foot building. That the tendency always is to get bigger. And so there is, I guess I'm asking if there's any interest in having further dialogue to that discussion, or do we want to move ahead with the remodel plan and have discussion on how we want to do the interior. At a minimum, if we were to build new, the construction managers and I agree, we need to do the roof at a minimum, really to sell the building, I think. You gotta disclose any issues related to roofs, of course.
Water stains do that.
Right.
Yeah, and we could eliminate portions of that 450,000, but I guess I'm asking here today, we haven't had a lengthy discussion on this just because of meeting schedules, but is there any interest of delaying and having further discussion on new, or is the board fine with going ahead with the roof and then we have further dialogue on the interior?
A couple questions, Mr. Chair.
Just, I'd like to pause this discussion and put it on hold because our time puts us into our public hearing posted note. So I would just merely like to suspend this discussion to allow us to get through the public hearing, which was scheduled for those that are here for that, and then pick up that discussion if that's acceptable to all. Okay. We will revert back in our agenda then to Human Resources. We have a public hearing on the fee schedule. Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board and staff. I am here to present, as we do annually, on recommended changes to the county adopted fee schedule. In a separate handout, you should have a copy of the fee schedule. In blue, you'll see what the recommended changes are. Only 3 departments have recommendations: property and public services, probation, and recorder. Nothing is very significant, pretty minor changes in the fees, and some verbiage as well. And along with that, there is a resolution.
Do you have any questions for?
Is there any way that you can make this font any smaller?
Here you go, Jack.
Mr. Chair, I suppose
Commissioner Lipke.
you have no idea, but like raising the 911 address signs from 170 to 257 or 37? 57. Do we have any idea what that actual cost is on those things to us, to the county?
Mr. Chair, I believe Manny Lamcamber could address that.
Seth knows.
Or Seth, is that a Seth question?
Those are actual costs. I hadn't, well,
Oh, really?
in past schedules hadn't been updated
Updated,
long
right.
before I
So,
was even here.
It is
So-
not a revenue enhancer, it's just a
No,
revenue
we
neutral.
just wanna, yeah,
Okay.
Recapture all the costs, the legitimate costs.
Thank you, it just seems like a lot of money.
yeah, well, like I said, that original cost was set well before I was here. I started my 12th year, so
Okay,
lots of years of inflation.
that's it, thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions from the board? This is a public hearing, so I would open this hearing to the public for anyone wishing to speak on this topic. Again, it's the establishment of the fee schedule for 2020.
Jamie, what were the other significant changes
Septic.
in here?
Septic.
Septic increase.
Yep, septic increase, let's see here.
75
Feedlot
to
permits
450.
increased. Probation decreased, MAD fee, and then added a sober track monitoring fee. And the recorder made a very minimal increase to abstract entry.
I'll ask Mandy, the septic increases, I'm assuming you compare with other counties, and we're just catching up.
Yeah, we did relabel some of the items on there, sort of based on the type of system. The more basic system doesn't require as much review as the more advanced system.
So like the privy fee increase, that was to discourage that, or just to get back the time that is involved for your people?
Just to really account for the time that goes involved with review of the design.
Okay.
And the holding, and they're essentially the same thing, just used differently.
Okay.
Okay, last call for public input. I will close the public hearing component. I would ask the commissioners if you have any other additional questions. If not, I would accept a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call the question, please.
Morrow?
Yes.
Goodall?
Yes.
Kolar?
Yes.
Lippy?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next public, we are not scheduled until 10 o'clock, so I believe I'd like to jump back and finish our discussion
North Bank.
with the North Mankato property. Go ahead.
Again, just looking for some direction here from the board on your wishes. Are there any desire to further examine the idea of new, or move ahead with essentially doing the roof on our existing building and then further discussion on the interior?
I think
Sure.
we need to talk about all the options. I think we're landlocked there, and there's a parking problem there.
We're a little tight on parking, but
But for future growth, we're tight on parking.
yeah, we've got 1.3 acres there. We can go back a ways, but
Isn't it kind of wet in back?
way back.
Way back in the far back corner of it.
So a couple questions.
Go ahead, John.
There isn't enough room on that property for another building of that size, is that correct?
Oh no, the building is constructed to where you can add on
Okay.
going north. It was designed that way.
Other
But
question
I really
is-
don't. I really don't think we're at that point. And actually, the design we've come up with is trying to get away from adding more space
Right.
to the county.
Yeah.
We're trying to incorporate more of the telecommuting concept of shared workspaces, landing spots, that type of thing, which we have just dove into here in the real recent past. So a new building will be more expensive, but we certainly can look at that.
Well, the other question was the brick and masonry and all is it functionally sound except for the roof? As far as we
Yeah,
know?
it's, the construction managers are very impressed with how it is structurally. Our HVAC, we're not doing a lot of work with that. Some of it is outdated. We've got a brand new air conditioner in there we just put in. The heating's fine. That'll have to be replaced someday, but
Okay.
overall, it's in good shape. It just needs a facelift and a redesign on the inside.
And the electric should be good.
Yeah.
And the building inside seems older than 25 years, doesn't it?
Because nothing's ever been done to
Yeah.
it, so.
There's been no modifications.
So I guess I agree with Marie, we should look at all options, but I think we better do the roof. And the sooner the better that we get the bid out.
In theory, though, with telecommuting, you'd need a smaller building.
Yes.
But you have to account for additional growth with
North
staff.
Mankato.
And not all of our staff will be able to 100% work from home. It'll be shared workspaces, that sort of thing. But we certainly can have additional dialogue on this.
Well, I'm with Commissioner Drano on this. I'd like to have continued discussion in part, and I think you and I have talked about what the future workforce will look like and where it'll be working from.
My hope is to not continue to add space. We've been adding a lot of space
Yes.
lately, and I wanna, my fear with a new building is we're gonna see an opportunity to expand, but it doesn't hurt to have that dialogue if we're gonna spend the money, to do something, so.
Mr. Chair, ahead of tabling motion, just like to say, and having your experience in North Mankato, I was asked this past week why we need to spend money on remodeling a place in North Mankato when people can just drive to St. Peter to get that stuff. And there's a lot of history that goes into the North Mankato location. If you'll recall, on Webster Avenue, I think there was a rental of social services, and in St. Peter, before this building was built, there was basement here and then rental in the Cornerstone building. So with North Mankato having up to 14,000 people of the 32,000 in Nicollet County, the reason that building was built by the people back in the early 90s, 95, was to answer those needs of those people who were needing that kind of service. And it's more than human services.
Right, it's health, public health, human services, so we have a WIC office there as well, and probation.
And probation. So I answered the gentleman who asked by saying, well, it serves a need, but we need to look toward the next 20 years now. And so, having heard what my fellow commissioners have said, I guess I would make a motion to table this discussion for future input from the administrator.
We have an open motion.
I'll second that.
No, we have a motion already, though.
Oh, did we?
Did we not?
No.
No?
I don't think
Okay,
so.
no, it's- all right, then we have a
Second.
motion and a second to table for further input and further discussion. Any other questions?
Would the board be okay if we scheduled a meeting sooner in January than our workshop, just to have a dialogue on this? Where if there is consensus to move forward with roof work, we can get that bid going then?
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's a yes, so.
I'd just like to make the comment, I'm gonna agree with Jack this time. It's not only North Mankato, there's several thousand other people
Right.
that is a convenient location for,
Right.
compared to St. Peter.
I agree.
And of course, Robert's Rules of Order would tell us there's no discussion after a tabling motion.
That's okay.
So,
That's helped us. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Our time is such that I would like now to take a break, and we will take a break, and our first public hearing will convene for the Drainage Authority, and so we will stand in recess, right?
so starting with.
We are in recess for the board meeting. We will convene the Ditch Authority at 10 a.m.
Look it up.
It's 10 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the Drainage Authority meeting. Before you, Commissioners, you have the Drainage Authority agenda items. And I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. We have a motion, we have a second. Sorry, I jumped ahead of you. Are you caught up?
No, yeah, that's good.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Do we have any additional public appearances? These are not the public hearing. This is merely unaddressed items for the public appearances. I see none. We will proceed with the County Ditch 90 public hearing on the final acceptance of the improvement project. Good morning, Jackie.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Today's hearing at 10 o'clock is for the final acceptance of County Ditch 90. It's the improvement project. We have received the final acceptance report from Mr. Brando, the engineer from ISG. This meeting has been notified and was mailed. All landowners were mailed notice of the hearing on November 25th of this year. It was also posted. So I will be requesting a final payment to Mathewitz in the amount of $19,671.61 to close this project. And then part 2 of this hearing will be the levy of the project. So if in fact we do approve this, then I'll also be asking you to approve the findings in order for the levy. So that will be part 2 of the project. But Chuck Randall is here from ISG to present his report.
Morning, Chuck.
Good morning. County Ditch 90, it was an improvement project. The board needs to accept the improvement. It's our opinion that the project is completed, it's functioning, it's working. Just a little bit of a background. Here's the watershed. County Ditch 90 is a primarily all ditch system with a short stretch of tile, 717 acres. The ditch drains to a pump station. The improvement was to replace the pump station with greater capacity. That has been done. Under other improvement projects, we would look at maybe abandoning tile or abandoning sections that were replaced with larger pieces. There's nothing to abandon because we tore out the old pump and replaced it with the new pump. So we have completed an as-built, which will be the new record, which is in the report. Shows the elevations of the pump, all the details that go along with the pump, the areas of the ditch that were cleaned. There were some culverts that were replaced. Here are the details of the pump plans themselves. Some pictures of the pumps running this year. So the contractor's final costs, this might be an easier thing to follow. At the final engineer's report, we had estimated a total cost of $419,656 for landowner costs on the project. I think with numbers updated from Jackie, I think we're at $421,079, very close to the original estimate. This is the final pay request. We ask that you approve this and for Mathewitz for $19,671.61. These are all the completed items and breakdown of that. Because this is just the replacement of a pump station, that's all I've got for a report, but the project is up and running and working. We have been working with Marvin a little bit on the elevation of the floats. One of our engineers went out and talked to the electrician just to tweak the elevation that the pump's running at for in the winter versus in the summer. So that's all I got for we recommend accepting the project.
Thank you. Jackie?
I do have one more item I wanted to clarify. Chuck did say the project was at estimated cost of $419,656, and I do have a handout for you guys on the actual costs, and that came in at $422,196.16. I'm sorry if we kind of
That's all right.
miscommunicated in numbers there. So it did come in slightly over. You can kind of see the comparison, what was over, what was under. One other item I wanted to articulate to the board was that the construction cost also included a reimbursement from ISG in the amount of $40,993.17 as a reimbursement for pump redesign and excess materials. And there's a letter in your packet from ISG regarding that, just for clarification on that.
Do you have anything else for the moment, Jackie?
I do not.
This is a public hearing, so I'd like to open this portion of the meeting to the public, inviting anyone to the podium if they would like to speak on this matter. Marvin, please, step forward. Identify yourself and your address, please.
Marv Giesecke, 51680 Fort Road. Yeah,
Good morning.
good morning, everybody. Glad that the project is where it's at finally. It was a long time coming. I guess, I think it was probably a learning process for all people involved. Took some time to get where we were hoping to get a lot sooner. I'm happy with the final, project is where it's at. One thing that I wanted to mention today, and maybe for future, like the maintenance portion of the ditch, and I've talked to Jackie about it also, seemed to go, like just maintaining the ditch system. So when it took us so long to get this project up and running, got to be very expensive. So time, when on projects like this, the longer it takes you to get it to where it needs to be, the cost is just like phenomenal. It just goes up so much. So it, would be good in the process when you're doing systems like this to, kind of keep that in mind. And with a pump system drainage, I think that running maintenance of it from here on should maybe be looked at a lot more often, if not 1 year, every 2 years or something, because other ditch systems, once you clean them or do, it's good. But this has always got expenses. So I guess that's about all I have to say. I guess I'm glad we're done.
Glad we are too. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it, really do. Anybody else like to speak on this issue? Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I will close the public comment portion. And what is the discussion amongst the board?
Well, Mr. Chair, you don't have to put a board against the outlet anymore, do you?
No.
So, Mr. Chair, at this point, are we looking for a motion?
Yes.
If the board would like to proceed, I have also provided findings in an order for your consideration to approve to close the hearing or to close the project and pay the final payment to Mathowitz and to accept the project as built that Chuck Brandel has presented.
And would you like those?
Would you like that I'm looking at the county attorney, how she would prefer to have those received. Do you want separate motions, or what is the best protocol to adopt?
I would recommend that you move to accept the project and then review the findings. I note the findings as proposed does have a space for adding the public comment, so that will need to be done, and then you can approve those findings.
Okay, so I'll start by moving acceptance of the project.
We
I'll
have a
second.
motion. We have a second. Any discussion? Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And you do have a copy of the findings in the order, correct?
Yes. County attorney, historically, we've written those or read those into the record. Is that your desire at this point?
I'd leave that up to to you, Mr. Chair, about how you would prefer to do that, and you can do it either way. I would, again, note that it needs to be amended to reflect, and I don't know if you have those findings to add Mr. Kisiki's comments, or if I should do so.
I'll be able to.
So we would just need to pause and/or come back to this so that we can add those, so that you can approve that finding in what you are taking your
What
final
is the
motion.
desire of the board? Are you accepting that? Just to explain to everybody what we're trying to resolve here is we have a legal process where we have to accept the findings, but we also have to, in those findings, make note of Marvin's testimony because that was part of the official record. So we need to take a bit of a time out, if you will, to get that information put in that record so we can vote and accept it. Does everybody understand that? Did I interpret that correctly, Madam County Attorney? Okay, so that being said, I'm at a loss here.
Well,
So.
you have a copy of the findings in front of you.
Would
Yes,
you-
have a copy? Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I'm quickly adding Mr. Giesecke's comments to the.
Thank you.
To the
Okay.
findings.
So then we are going to go into a brief pause.
Right,
Until
a
that's
reset.
resolved. And then while you're thinking of that, Madam County Attorney doing two things at the same time, do you want to read them into the record, or are you indifferent?
I leave that to the chair's option about how he would
Okay.
prefer.
Mr. Chair, since we are going to be adding language to it, it may be appropriate to read it in.
That's was gonna be my question, so.
And I can read it into.
All right, so there will be a brief hiatus while our county attorney types, and then Jackie will read it into the record officially, and then we will vote. Go ahead, Marvin. Sorry, we try to make sure everybody gets something said, Marvin. I appreciate it. And you have been incredibly patient with this process, and we certainly appreciate that. And again, the process forces us to do things in a specific way, as you well know. So again, thank you for your patience with us and the process.
You still got a lot of corn stalks to clean out of it? Stuff?
Yeah, that's an issue that I'm hoping we're.
Has everybody on the board reviewed the findings that were submitted to you? Yes, well, yes, everybody should have had the email, and the highlighted portion is going to be reflect Marvin's testimony.
Glad it's over 3 words, though.
Well, I know, but I just want to make sure that it's in the record as people are comfortable with.
I have it here. Abby, I'm emailing it to you.
Okay.
Okay, we're fast approaching that point where she's going to be able to read it in for us, so thank you for your perseverance.
Okay, it should be to.
Got my name right on
So Mr.
We just accepted the project.
So just show read the findings, then we'll vote to accept.
Correct. Well, he gets a chance to say if that's what I said, right?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, I could read what I have if you want to move forward.
She's going to read it in anyhow.
Okay.
She's going to read in the whole finding.
Okay.
So when we get to that point, when she's ready for that, I'll ask
Tim
Marvin
Weibel's
to moderate it.
Oh, yeah, 61, huh?
I don't know.
Well, they had a big 60th for him
Oh,
last
okay.
year. And then apparently some of the people brought balloons, and the balloons got away and they hit the electric line. They put Cortland out of power.
Should have used non-conductive balloons.
You and Tim are Facebook friends?
We are.
I've never got into that. I just get criticized all
Thank you. And that came via email also, did it not?
Yes, that.
finish the draft, Marvin, when we get to the portion of the public hearing, I'd ask you to verify if indeed that was your intent as it was reported in this. It will be under item 9. So I'd ask Jackie to,
Oh, I found an error. Or at least each alternating year, it should be least.
what,
The end of number 9, the
end
last,
of number 9?
second to last word of number 9, third last word, fourth last. Number 9.
Oh, yes. Okay. You make that correction then yours?
Michelle has the, yeah, I will say the correct thing when we
Thank
go
you.
to there. Okay.
Okay, go ahead. and
Before the
proceed.
Nicollet County before the Nicollet County Drainage Authority regarding the final acceptance of the improvement project to Nicollet County Ditch Number 90. Findings in order of the board regarding final acceptance of improvement project to County Ditch Number 90. The Drainage Authority, having completed its deliberation, its examination of all files and records herein, and its consideration of all reports, make the following findings. Number 1. By order dated June 13th, 2017, the Nicollet County Drainage Authority established the improvement project to County Ditch Number 90 in Nicollet County. Number 2. Upon advertised bids, the Drainage Authority awarded a contract for construction to Mathowitz Construction Company. Number 3. Concurrent with the proceedings to establish the drainage project, the Drainage Authority appointed viewers for the purpose of the determining benefits and damages for the improvement project to County Ditch Number 90. Number 4. In the proceedings, damages were awarded based on the impact system construction had on adjacent properties and to account for the future burden and entry for ongoing maintenance and inspection of the system. Number 5. Upon completion of the construction of the improvement project, the project engineer inspected the construction and prepared a report to the Drainage Authority showing the contract price, the amount paid on certificates, the unpaid balance, and the work completed under the contract. Number 6, the engineer has concluded that the work was performed according to the plans and specifications for the improvement, was performed within the right-of-way for which damages have been determined and paid for the construction and future maintenance of the system, and was performed by the contractor in a timely and workmanlike manner by the contractor. Number 7, the engineer has concluded that all amounts under the contract, including change orders and penalties, if any, have been duly paid to the contractor, and that any retainage should be released to the contractor as provided in the contract. Number 8, upon receipt of the engineer's report, the Nicollet County Public Services Manager set a time and a location for the hearing on the report, gave notice of the hearing by mail to affected landowners and by posting at the meeting place at least 10 days before the hearing, and included an invitation in the notice that parties objecting to the acceptance of the contract may appear and be heard. Number 9, during the public hearing portion of the proceedings, the following persons appeared and provided comment. Marvin Giesecke appeared before the board and noted his concern that the length of the draining proceedings contributes to the total cost of the project. He further noted that the cost of pumping maintenance should be reviewed annually or at least as each alternating year. Number 10, the contract has been complete in accordance with the plans and specifications. The order, based on the ongoing findings and the entire record of proceedings before the board, acting as the drainage authority for Nicollet County Ditch Number 90, hereby orders as follows. A, the contract herein is accepted as complete. B, any retainage under the contract shall be released to the contractor upon proof of release of all liens of contractors or material men related to the project. C, the Public Service Manager of Nicollet County is ordered to pay the balance due on the contract, if any, and the costs of the improvement as provided by Minnesota Statute, Chapter 103E, dated December 17th, 2019. Denny Kemp, Chairperson of the Drainage Authority, for signature and attest by Ryan Crush, County Administrator.
Arvin, would that be an accurate description of your commentary? Thank you. I entertain a motion.
I'll move the findings in order.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We now should proceed to the findings in order for the consideration of levy and terms.
Correct. Now that the project is complete, the county has expended funds in advance and now is asking for reimbursement from landowners by levying the ditch system. There is a findings and order that has been provided to you. Just a little bit of a breakdown. The cost of the project is $421,079.10. The annual maintenance costs, this was costs that Mr. Giesecke was referring to of the $84,885.48. These are costs since 2015, since the project was started. And since this is a pumping cost, this system will have annual or biannual levies on it at any cost anyway. And so we didn't levy landowners during that time thinking that that project was nearly completing, and then it stretched out a little too long. So that will be reviewed every year. And then we are also by statute allowed to have a repair fund of $25,000 and for future costs to hopefully absorb some of those costs that we're going to have in the future, so we're not constantly turning around and levying landowners. So the total levy that I'm recommending is $530,632.58. These assessments would be levied to landowners, and they would have until January 31st, 2020 to pay those assessments without any interest. After that, they would go on the tax rolls if there's a balance remaining. Depending on the amount owed would be the terms of the assessment. So any amount up to $25,000 would be a 5-year assessment at 4% interest. Anything $2,501 or to $75,000 would be a 10-year assessment with 4% interest, and any assessment over $75,000 would be a 15-year assessment at 4% interest. Landowners have been notified what their potential bills will be, and they have also been notified of the terms. And I have spoke to many of them. I believe there's a good understanding of where we're at with this project. So what I would be asking is that the Drainage Authority approve the findings in order to go ahead with the levy for $530,632.58.
So moved.
Second.
Do we want to read in the order?
Again, I leave that to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I've started one, I might as well get the rest of them done. Vocalize a little bit, Jackie, thank you.
All right, before the Nicollet County Drainage Authority for assessing landowners, Nicollet County Ditch number 90. Findings in order for the board regarding drainage ditch system assessments, installment schedules, interest rates, and repair funds. The Drainage Authority, having completed its deliberation, its examination of all files and records herein, and its consideration of all reports, make the following finding of facts. Number 1, Minnesota Statute 103E.725 provides all fees and costs incurring relating to a drainage system, including repairs, improvements, inspections, engineering, viewing, and publications, are costs of the drainage system and must be assessed against the property in the entities benefited. Number 2, if there is not enough money in the drainage system account to pay drainage system costs, the board may assess the costs on all properties and entities that have been assessed benefits for the drainage system. Number 3, if assessments are to be paid in installments, the board may set an interest rate not to exceed the rate determined by the state court administrator for judgments under Minnesota statute number 549.09. Minnesota statute number 103E.725 allows the creation of a repair fund for each drainage system. The repair fund is intended to create a positive balance in a drainage system account to pay routine costs of inspections, minor maintenance, and to eliminate the need of inter-fund loans to drainage system accounts. Number 5, to create a repair fund, the Drainage Authority may apportion and assess an amount against all property and entities assessed for benefits. The fund may not exceed 20% of the assessment benefits of the drainage system or $100,000, whichever is greater. Number 6, the Drainage Authority staff has investigated the balance of the Nicollet County Ditch Number 90 account and made a recommendation for an assessment, installment schedule, interest rates, and repair funds. The order, based on the foregoing findings and the entire record of proceedings before the Nicollet County Board of Commissioners, the board, acting as the drainage authority for Nicollet County Ditch Number 90, hereby adopts the following drainage system assessment, installment schedule, interest rate, and repair fund, and directs certificates thereof to the Nicollet County Public Service Office for collection. County Ditch 90, the improvement cost is $421,079.10. The annual general maintenance cost is $553.48. The repair fund is $25,000 with a total levy of $530,632.58. All assessments not paid by January 31st, 2020 will be charged 4% interest, and the following installment schedule will apply to your property tax billing starting in 2020. Up to $25,000 is a 5-year assessment. $25,000 to $75,000 is a 10-year assessment. Over $75,000 would be a 15-year assessment. Dated December 17th, 2019. Denny Kemp, Chairperson of the Drainage Authority, and attested by Ryan Crush, the County Administrator.
Jackie?
Just like to confirm that the second finding, the statement is that the board must assess the costs on all property, as opposed to may. It says must. I think it may have been read as may.
Oh, did I read it as may? I'm sorry. It is
Okay.
must. I'm sorry.
Anything else? We had a motion and a second. The findings have been read. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. That should complete all of our action with regard to County Ditch 90.
Correct. That is closed.
Madam County Attorney, are we consistent? Very good. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Marvin. Thank you for your patience. And we will proceed to 79. I think we're going to have a turnover of personnel here. So
Maybe take 3 or 4 minutes, Mr.
we'll
Chair.
take a couple of minutes here to get people in and out. So thank you so much. Appreciate it, Marvin.
Bye.
I'd like to reconvene our public hearing on County Ditch 79. This is the public hearing continuation from the November 26th meeting to determine the Port Authority needed additional information to, in order to make its decision. I'd like to call upon Chuck Randall to answer any questions raised in the material sent through the board. I believe you drafted a document for us.
Yes, I did. And I can hand that out if you guys do it. Did you guys get a copy of it?
We have.
You have a copy of it? Okay. So there was a letter that I received via the county attorney from Rinky Noonan. There were a few questions in that letter. I'm not going to read. I'm just going to read our responses, but there was a discussion on the amount of repairs and what we used for repairs. Understanding that the ditch was cleaned in 2014. We did a survey in 2017, and portions near the outlet had sediment built up in them, so we included cleaning that section. There was a culvert that was requested to be removed. We included the cost to remove that culvert. And then there was a township road culvert near the end of the cleaning area that had a dent in the top of it. It was a metal culvert. On past projects, working with the Nicollet County Drainage Authority, for instance, 90, we replaced the metal culverts with concrete culverts. So we did include that in this project. That is an item that if the Drainage Authority feels that they want to get more life out of that culvert, we could leave that in place. It doesn't affect the improvement. The improvement is further downstream near the outlet. Let's see what other items. We did give the viewers a cost for the private culvert that was being removed on what it would cost to replace that at today's costs. And then I believe the other items we stated that should be a question for the viewers. They addressed how reduced future costs by the culvert, how the outlet fee was applied, and then the last item addressed reduced damages from an overflow. We put together a exhibit based on the elevations. It showed that if this system were to completely fill in, what acreage would flood, and it's kind of hard to see, it does come up the ditch system, and then gave that acreage, which was approximately 39.2 acres, to the viewers, so they had that information to for their assessment. So that's what we've done since the last hearing. If you'd like us to go over the project, let me know, and I can sure go over the project if you need a recap.
Okay.
So.
Do you have an interest at this point, Warren, or could we proceed with Mr. Rehnquist? Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were asked to to look at and provide a better explanation of how we came up with $100,000 worth of benefit to the existing ditch system. Within our original report, we called that an outlet benefit. It was a benefit based upon the existing ditch system, and it was called outlet so that it was our assumption that those costs would be prorated against the existing benefits that system in our mind receives as a part of this project. The biggest number to start with really is the cost to replace the culvert, which is currently being removed. When we looked at that originally, although there was not a cost estimate in the engineer's report for its replacement, we said that culvert would be similar to the Marty culvert. The estimated cost for the Marty culvert was $35,000 total, I think, so we said about $30,000 would remove and replace that existing culvert. The other part of that culvert consideration is like we do with road damages in an improvement. If we're causing an additional cost currently and in the future for maintenance of that road crossing, we typically try to estimate the life and allow a 1 or 2% capitalization rate above inflation. So it doesn't mean that an investment is only at 1 or 2%. Our estimate is that investment of the additional damages made at 1 or 2% above inflation will give the road authority enough dollars in the future to replace that crossing again. I don't know the exact life. I don't know the exact investment potentials. So within our estimate, we said a minimum 50-year at 1% above inflation, or 2% above inflation, a maximum of 100 years at 1%, because we don't know. So much of this outlet benefit is a range of values, not a specific known commodity or cost. So it does look like a very large range when you go from 8,000 to 24,000, but that is the present value of the next replacement, including that additional investment for another one beyond that. We looked also then at if this system is not extended to Swan Lake and the wetland impacts that are currently being experienced continue to develop, and as Chuck has said, if that culvert were, if the private ditch were to fill in completely. That may happen in 1 year if the existing private crossing were to fail, as there is no public measure to have to replace that. It may take 30 or 50 years for it to fill in completely. Once again, I do not know. What we estimated as to a cost savings, because once that channel is filled in, the existing ditch system will silt in much quicker because the flows will not make it through that wetland. So rather than being a 10-year frequency repair, we said it's going to be a 5-year frequency repair out for the years, and estimated that at $10,000 to $15,000 worth of present cost savings for that future maintenance reduction. If that private channel were to fail, as Chuck's map had showed, there's 39 acres that he identified. His 39 acres does include the existing wetland. We didn't go quite to the extent of saying that those 39 acres would become all non-productive. We looked at it and said about 5 acres would be added to the wetland and probably non-usable for agricultural purposes. The other would be to where the outlet for subsurface drainage would become further and further restricted. But it would probably be high enough that they could still have a useful purpose. So we've estimated that the damage long-term, and I don't know if long-term means 1 year or 20 or 30 years, would be $40,000 to $50,000 worth of additional damage that I'm certain was not considered when they paid damages during the original establishment of this ditch, because we assumed that that private ditch has always been there to provide the outlet up until now. So I can't give you a specific number. I'm not good enough to say that the average was 99,500. So as I do with most appraisal practices, I come up with an opinion, and it is subject to the nickels and dimes. But I felt, as we discussed this, and we agreed that a reasonable value with all of those assumptions would be that $100,000. The one other question that was asked was about the damages. And for the tillable acres that are taken for the channel, we allowed $6,500 per acre. Temporary damages of $500 per acre. For the non-tillable acres, we allowed $1,500 per acre for the new channel alignment for the area taken for the channel. And then we figured about 3 years of loss of haying, or about $225 of that would go towards the temporary area. So it's not extremely well explained in the acreages within the report, but that was the values that we ended up having included in the report. So the final temporary damages are something that will be amended based on the actual construction.
Any questions for Mr. Renfro?
I did add the damage summary up on the screen. It was part of our original report. So that's where the areas came from for the damage calculation.
The .34 at 7,000 is really 34 at 65 and 34 at the 500.
Mr. Chair, the non-tillable, you thought that was a reasonable value?
That, to us, that we felt that was a reasonable value. It does not significantly impact any of the structure or the use, other than that we've taken it out of a hare pasture, highest and best use, because it was excess acres compared to the buildings themselves. And I have no other shoreline sales that would indicate that there is a recreational or other use value decrease because of that. So we used it as a hare pasture value for those excess acres along through there.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
this is a public hearing, a continuation of such, I would allow those of you in the gallery that would wish to speak to this issue, please come forward, identify yourselves by name and address, and give your testimony. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
My name is Ronnie Cordes.
Good morning.
My address is 62664 County Road 21 out of New Ulm.
Perfect.
I am the party, though, that owns the land where the cabin is,
Okay.
where the ditch is being
Have a
proposed to
seat. Be
go.
comfortable.
Okay, I'd like to first start out is my understanding of this project is that was originally started because of the culvert, the Marty culvert, or Giesecke culvert, whatever you call it, that culvert is collapsing, and it is. There is no argument that that culvert doesn't need to be replaced. If that does collapse, the ditch will stop flowing. And I also agree that there is a water problem. You know, the water issue was added on later with the ditch and stuff like that. And I also agree there's a water issue. But I don't know that running an additional ditch across our property is going to solve your water issue. The water issue, basically, well, first off, nobody southwest of County Road 21 is affected at all by any of these issues. I took pictures in the summer of 2018. The ditch at County Road 21 is basically 6 inches wide it flowed down to, and less than 1.5 inches deep. You could put your hand across it and you could put your finger in it, and that was the total flow in the summer of 2018. So below that, right below that, between County Road 21 and the Township Road, the lake was backed up the ditch halfway across Mr. Halke's field. So the issue that I'm seeing is that the level of the lake is at a level that the ditches can't possibly work at the end. If you look at Chuck Brandel's maps here, page 8 on the map, shows the current situation that we are dealing with.
Yep, I've got it up on the screen.
This year, the water level on the lake was over, at or above 981 feet, which puts it over the high water mark by about 4 to 5 inches, which backs it all the way up almost to County Road 21, which backs us up into all the tile outlets, or most of the tile outlets in that section. So you actually have lake water that is flowing back up the tile into the fields, creating a water issue. So above that, they did the last time in 2014, they cleaned the ditch. Well, they went down the opposite side, it would be the south side of the ditch when they cleaned it. So if you're looking at the map, those of you that have a map and stuff like that, there, as you go down the map, when you get to about number 10, is where they stopped cleaning the ditch, because they were on the south side of the ditch. They got into the water with the backhoe and whatever they were using, and they stopped cleaning the ditch. Well, they can legally continue, if they were on our side, on the north side of the ditch, they can continue to legally clean all the way up to the high water mark. So that section is not cleaned out. And if you look at the bottom, if you've got a map that has all the different lines that show your elevations and everything, if you look on there, it goes all the way to about that point, and then there's a berm there. Well, the berm was because the water was moving while they were cleaning the ditch, and when it hit the high water in the slough, it dropped silt. If you walked in there with waders, you're not hitting hard bottom. You're hitting silted bottom. Silt will move once the water starts moving again. If you look down the photo here, the photo shows that through the slough, and you can't, through the line there like that, you can actually see where the ditch is yet that was cleaned in 1981. It's still visible on the photos. If you walk out there, that ditch is still there. If you look at the ledger at the bottom, that ditch is still at or close to the level that the new proposed project goes to, which is 978.2 feet. That ditch in the slough in the middle of that wetland is still at that level. So it's fully functional, doesn't need any attention whatsoever. The only thing that needs attention is the ends going into the slough where it's silted in, and coming out of the slough where there's a beaver dam. Now they started these elevation projects this elevation back in 2015. It was the first record that I saw where they were measuring elevations. That beaver dam has been there for like 4 years. So there's a good possibility the beaver dam was there when they were in there doing the measuring. And I know it was for the end of it. It might have been when they started. So the beaver dam is still there, and the beaver dam has a picture of it in this book, showing that it's there. If you go out there now, you can still see where it's under the water, but it's still there. So continuing down the ditch then, the section from the wetland to the lake hasn't been cleaned since 1981 also. Now, we said that, you know, we gave them permission to go in and clean out that section of the ditch. When they get down to the culvert needs to be replaced. It's going to collapse and give us an issue. And once you get beyond the culvert, from the culvert to the lake, has never been cleaned. Or past the culvert, it was dug out a little bit. You can see there's cement blocks and stuff like that there, but that would have fallen out from where they were trying to berm up the road. If you go out beyond that, there's the water channel, or the water has washed a channel when the lake was low, like 15 years ago. So when the lake was low, that water has washed a channel all the way out. It extends way past the end of their dock, probably 80, 90 feet. You can still go in there today with your waders, and you have to be careful or it'll go over the top of the waders. I was in there this last summer. So, at this point we're saying, you know, there's no data supporting that the ditch we have doesn't work. There definitely is data that we need to replace the culverts and that we need to do something there with the ditch between the slough and that. And we're giving permission to do that. We're also giving permission for them to go down on the other end on our side and clean out all the way to the high water mark, the portion leading into the slough. So, you know, I'm not sure what the DNR is planning on doing with the water levels, but until they lower the water levels, this water issue is not going to go away. So you can dig all the ditches you want, you're not going to solve the problem. And the other thing, just going through here now, I did see in Chuck's thing where he had said there's going to be 1.38 acres that are going to be either lost or damaged on our property with doing the new ditch. And I also saw on the other sheet, the letter that I received, that we are looking at getting like $2,380. So, or $2,380 is the price. Well, I don't know if anybody's tried to go out and buy hunting land on Swan Lake lately, but that isn't anywhere as close to what the stuff is going for. Olson family just sold 3 acres for over $30,000 over by the Poor Farm Woods. So the compensation isn't anywhere as close. The damage to our property is forever. I mean, nobody wants to ditch through their yard. You know, it decreases the value, it takes away land. We bought 10 acres there, which would have made it an illegal building site. Now, we have a cabin on there, but that's not to say that in the future, someday, you know, from a value standpoint, that you wouldn't want to sell it for somebody to build a house there. So the state already took away 2 acres from us with the high water marks and saying we couldn't own land, the water. Now you're going to come in and take another 1.38 acres away from us. Our lot's getting pretty small. So, those are our concerns. I have absolutely nothing to gain from this entire project. I don't need a culvert going across to the other side of there. I don't need a ditch. I don't farm. I do nothing. I go out there for hunting. It's purely recreational for us. But we are the party that's going to receive all the damages. So, I don't know if anybody has any other questions from me or wants to know anything.
Questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, this is public hearing. Any others? I see council would like to.
Good morning, my name is Steve Fronta. I'm an attorney for petitioners. My address business address is 106.5 North Minnesota Street, New Ulm, Minnesota. I have quite a number of things I'd like to say today, and I don't want to take over amount of time, but I think it's important, even though I apologize ahead of time if anything I present here is redundant from, what has been discussed or presented to you in the past. But I think if we really look at this, and it seems to me that we can narrow it down to some very basic things. And there's a lot of technical things, a lot of technical information, and related to the hydrology, related to the cost assessments and the benefits assessments. But if we remember that in the 50s, when this ditch was dug, there was established for the landowners a property right. And the landowners are those persons benefiting from the ditch. And at that time, there was also a right that has not legally been established, but I think everyone would agree, common sense says that really this recently found information that the termination of the actual ditch system ends in the wetland, and that it's a private ditch going into Swan Lake. Well, at all times, in all instances, in all the hearings, in all the findings, it was always stated that the outlet is the wetland going from there into Swan Lake. It's always stated that Swan Lake is the outlet, even though the ditch terminates prior to that, to getting there. So really, these landowners who were given a private, a property right when they paid for the ditch and the ditch was established, they were also given a property right in that private ditch easement, if you call it, from the ditch system termination to Swan Lake. And so if you look at Mr. Brandel's report, in numerous places he says in the report that the Swan Lake is the outlet, Swan Lake is the outlet. Am I stating that correctly?
Eventually, yeah. Yep.
And as I understand, as I'm reading through these things, that there is no place really when the petition was brought to extend the ditch so that we could do exactly as Mr. Rehnquist has said, assure certainty that we would have this going forward for the system, for the owners of the properties that had this property right granted to them under the proceedings of the establishment. So really, the next question then becomes, well, so what are we doing here? One of the findings that this board needs to make is that, we're dealing with a separable part of the ditch. I think that's goes without saying. I think that's been established that we have a separate part of the ditch, a separable part under the statute. Would anybody disagree with that or have a question about that? Am I reading anything wrong that would say that that's not a separable part? Well, as a separable part, it is a part of the ditch system, even though it's not a part of the ditch system. Let's see. Legally, it's not a part of the ditch system, but practically, and if we were to try to establish that, if the private ditch were ended and we came in and had a battle over whether that private ditch should really be repaired, maintained, because that wasn't the intent from the very outset, right from the very beginning. And I think we could have all kinds of testimony that would prove that, it would show that, but again, what I want to point out is that really, are we doing anything other than ancillarily, other than on the fringe, doing anything except bringing the system to the point at which it was first established, the specs, the capacity? We're not asking to do anything more than what it was from the very start. We're not asking to drain any more lands, but as a result of the fact that the DNR is not willing to tell us, and likely will not tell us, that they will and will not approve a petition, a project going through the wetland, even as Mr. Cordes says, we have his permission. That's great. That's fine. We appreciate the cooperation and the understanding and everything, but yet at the same time, what good does that do us if we don't have the DNR that would allow us a permit to dig the way we would all like to see it done and repaired and maintained? And so what I'm saying is that because of the fact that we have the DNR sitting here and telling us that we're likely not going to approve it going through the wetland, therefore the only next best alternative, really, the only alternative, is to go around. And so in going around, then we show that, according to Mr. Randall's report, Mr. Rehnquist's report, that there's benefit to additional lands. There's some improvement to drain additional lands that weren't part of the original system, that weren't assessed as a part of the original system. Because why? Because they were benefit by the private ditch. They could have drained into that private ditch or into that, and that took the water away from there. So what I want to impress upon the board here is that we're not making an improvement to add improved benefits. We're just trying to maintain the status quo and have it a functioning ditch the way it was intended to be from the get-go, from the very start. And so with the statute under which we brought the petition specifically says that some of the improvement costs, i.e. the cost to extend the ditch, not the separable maintenance that Mr. Randall lists in his proposed improvement options, that separate maintenance is clearly separate maintenance. But as to the separable part of the ditch and as to the improvement costs, the statute specifically says these improvements costs, these costs related to the extension of the ditch, can be split into two parts. The one part is the part which says that because the ditch as it currently exists today needs repair, what amount of that repair can be alleviated, or what amount of that repair would not have to be done if we were to make this improvement. And so Mr. Rehnquist specifically addresses that and says specifically that if we did not make this improvement, we would incur these additional expenses and costs, and therefore it's a benefit to eliminate them, to alleviate them, and to reduce them, and to mitigate them. So I certainly believe that there's no question that the statute allows for these, a good portion of the costs of the improvement, extending the ditch over and across the full pro rata, landowners pro rata across their benefits. So in addition to the statutory provision from under which we brought this petition, the statutory provision for the assessment of the outlet, or the benefits for an outlet, are addressed if I can find it here. In the statute related to assessing drainage benefits and damages, subdivision 6 says specifically that a proposed project that furnishes or improves an outlet can be assessed a single amount as an outlet benefit. And so in the paperwork, as we say, we call this an outlet benefit, an outlet fee, an improvement in an outlet. I don't care what we want to call it. It's really who gets the benefit of in making this repair, making this improvement. Who gets the benefit? And so the statute anticipates this, specifically anticipates this. And I want to also say that there is a case that came before the Minnesota Supreme Court in the year 2000 from Murray County. And in that case, the Supreme Court specifically looked at this statute under which we brought the petition and specifically stated that in summary, specifically stated that the determination that they were going to eliminate and alleviate some future repair costs and get some certainty into the system is able to be assessed against the entire system and all the landowners benefited by the entire system. And I think it's also important to cite what the court stated. I apologize for the length of this discussion, but the Supreme Court says this: in a sense, the repair aspect of the project is a concept only. And here the concept is what? We had this system. It worked until silt came in. It worked until it was supposed to have been cleaned back in 2014, but we couldn't because we found out that it wasn't part of the system. So the repair aspect of the project is a concept only, but it serves the useful purpose of determining what part of the total project costs should be assessed against all property owners benefited by the entire ditch. The need for making such a determination is clear. The ditch as a whole is improved by the improvement project just as if the repair had been made, and the fact that a repair is not actually made that would return the ditch to its original constructed capacity should not affect the applicability of the section under which we brought the statute. Which we brought the petition. And so I think the practical facts of the circumstances, I think the statutes, and I think the statutes and the case law, Supreme Court case, and I think the analysis of the engineer, the analysis of the viewers, all point to the fact that we have sufficient evidence, we have sufficient findings that can be made based on these facts, and that this project should be approved, and that the project should go forward as proposed, option number 2, and therefore I would ask the board to consider this for the benefit of the landowners. It's another concept is it's long been held that in fact it is the duty of the ditch authority to maintain the ditch. And this action would do exactly that, maintain the ditch. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional individuals? This is still part of the public hearing that would like to speak on this matter.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question?
I thought we had got it. Are there any other individuals wishing to speak to the issue? Please, sir, step forward. Identify yourself by name and address. Have a seat.
Good morning. My name is Gerald Fitzner, 45998 531st Avenue, Cortland.
Good morning, Mr. Fitzner.
I'd just like to remind the board that in 2014, our ditch was selected as one of the first to come up to the water quality standards. The county saw fit to have it, the ditch, the 16-foot buffer strip seeded at a cost of $1,600 an acre when the farmers could have done it for $100 an acre. We've done our part, and right now this ditch is at a standstill, and I would urge you to let this project go forward so we can finish up what we've started. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak to this issue? Third and last call. Anyone else? I'll close the public hearing portion of this. Board members, questions?
A question for Mr. Rehnquist. Were the Cordises aware of the value you put on their property? Did you
The
discuss it with them?
the damage values were included as a part of the viewer's report. It is not for the removal of deeded acres from their parcel. It is an easement that changes the restrictive use of that 1 acre to where it will be a ditch rather than the fringe area around the wetland. It is not removing or acquiring fee title or reducing their parcel size. So, like I said, we are not looking at the total value of the property, only the change in value because it becomes a ditch rather than a different use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, anybody else?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I might, and I'm late, somewhat late to the party here, I acknowledge that, so I apologize if you all have gone through this, but Chuck, could you go back, maybe this picture that you've got up there, could you make that a little larger? And I apologize all, I'm just trying to understand so where does the ditch outlet end and then Mr. Cordis's private property begin? Could you just,
The
do you
right,
mind if I stand up, because I really can't see.
The purpley thing?
see this, the little point on the red watershed boundary? So north is to the right, and this right here, if you can see where the pointer's at, is the legal end of the ditch.
Okay. And so this is Mr. Cordis's property here, correct?
Correct. The property line is approximately the ditch, and then it used to be split in the wetland. Now it is along the edge of the wetland. And if I zoom in, this black line was a line that had been discussed that it was the wetland boundary. It's hard to see, but this jagged line right along the outside edge of the proposed ditch is where the DNR has come in and done a wetland survey or an OHW survey. So they have jurisdiction inside this dashed line. And they've told us we will not, more than likely not, get a permit to do any work inside of that line.
And so, you all can help me too. So the problem here is it's not flowing here?
There's
You talk
material.
about silt buildup in the lake?
There's silt built up here. You can follow the here and here. And this culvert is near failure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, member, for allowing me an understanding of that. Mr. Chair, members, I'm a little concerned. I'm hearing about the DNR will likely turn down the application, but I'm not hearing the DNR turn down the application. I'm hearing they're likely to. Chuck, are you telling me that they're going to?
They would fight us on this application. They've told us they would fight us on it and not give us a permit. That's what they verbally told me.
For option one.
We have not applied for that permit, so I don't have that in writing. I have that verbally. The DNR comments, what did they say in their letter? Just give me a second to zoom in on it. It is the most likely option to be approved by the DNR. That's their on record statement.
Mr. Chair, question, Chuck? Chuck, isn't the opinion, even if they would give us that permission, it'd probably never happen again?
If we would be able to get the permission and make that a county ditch, we'd have a lot more rights to go back and clean it. That's why we probably won't get it.
Okay.
Because once it becomes part of the county ditch system, you have the right to maintain it.
But I think we all read the letter from them. I'd like to move, we go ahead with option two.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a second. Discussion.
There's really three things here. They need to get their water to move. Mr. Cordes is saying it's a backup from the lake, and Mr. French is worried about who's paying for it and how they're paying for it. Is this what we're getting at here? Pretty much.
Well, and Mr. Cordes is worried about the value of
The value of his
property, yes.
Yeah, and then indirectly, is it really needed because of the backup from the lake and the high water levels of the lake, and that's gonna be an issue and has been an issue for decades. It's just not gonna go away.
If I may, the reason I'm struggling is if the DNR said no, and I say, I'm sorry, Mr. Cordes, the DNR said no, we can't do it there. And I'm hearing, Chuck, I'm not dismissing your expertise and experience, and I did read the DNR letter. I'm just having a problem taking away someone's property right on our guess that, or prediction.
If I may,
Yeah.
we did apply for the permit for option 2. We did not apply for option 1. We could apply for that permit and get an official denial if you would like. The plans are done. But my past experience in ditches that even have designated as a ditch through a wetland, you can't break one law to follow another law. So the Wetland Conservation Act basically says we can't dig in a wetland without any other reason. There is an alternative. You have to, when you look at wetlands, you look at alternatives. There is an alternative here, which is, I'm trying to get us there without spending additional dollars. I'm giving you my opinion. We could go down this path. I don't think we would win. So.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Fronta, do you agree with his assessment?
With Mr. Granville's?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Well, the only other question I have, Mr. Chair, if I might, would
Please.
be, if we vote yes on the motion, are we approving the valuation paid to Mr. Cordes?
Well, we still have to establish all the findings.
In some respects, Mr. Chair, you would be because it's part of the damage calculation. However, I don't know that, I think there's enough cushion in there that it's not going to tip the apple cart. However, I think you are in fact looking at some of those valuation issues and approving that valuation because you would be approving the report of the viewer as well as the final engineering report of Mr. Brandel. So yes, I think you would be best to address the valuation of Mr. Cordes' property as part of this motion so that the findings can be drafted appropriately.
So procedurally, I need to back that up, or we need to amend.
Well, I don't know that we need to amend. I'm thinking it through, Mr. Ripkus, I respect what you're saying about the valuation. It just feels to me that a new ditch through a piece of property is more than an easement. I hear the legal term, I believe, I agree with you, but it just seems like the effect is more than that.
Mr. Rehnquist has an input.
Yes, with trying to do before and after valuations, in our opinion, it must be defensible. Not that it appears correct, but we have no evidence to increase the value other than to say its use as excess acres will be impacted. There is nothing around the lake that I'm going to say is going to shorten or shrink the size and change the highest and best use of those 10 acres from being potentially a cabin. It's my understanding he still owns the acreage under the wetland. They're restricted. He can't drain them. He can harvest hay on them if they ever dry out enough. But he still does own them. If he bought 10 acres, he still owns 10 acres. This is just changing and restricting the use of one more acre around the edge of the wetland. And it is the board's determination to increase that. I think my number is defensible in my opinion, but if the board feels that there are other value considerations that weren't given, I have no reason to say that they wouldn't become defensible. I just didn't find evidence to support that at this point.
Mr. Cordes, please.
Our initial purchase was to the original ditch. So if you go and dig a ditch across our yard there, we lose access to the additional 2 acres that the DNR had taken away, or to the additional out to the ditch. We have no access to there. How are we going to get to that if we put a ditch across the yard? So the reality is we've lost, total is going to be over 3 acres that we've lost access to.
Sir.
My name is Paul Giesecke, 51814 448th Lane, right there on Swan Lake.
Yes, sir, Mr. Giesecke. Have a seat.
Choruses aren't losing access to anything. They might have a wetland. It's still a wetland beyond that, them 3 acres. I can't stop them from using it. Nobody's going to stop them from using it. It's public or a wetland. They still have access to all of it. I mean, they may have to cross a ditch or something. They're not losing access to any of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giesecke. That's a procedural question I don't know the answer to.
Maybe you would have to. We should speak so everybody can hear the comments.
The question is whether the motion can be amended in any way. That's what we're trying to figure out procedurally. Or do you withdraw the motion and do a new motion?
You could move to amend your motion, or you could agree to the amendment and then proceed to discuss the amended motion. I believe would be the proper.
So yes, you can, as long as Marie makes this, verifies the second.
Well, I'm wondering if we should give Mr. Cordes an extra 5,000, if that would simplify everything, or would it make it messier?
Is that just an arbitrary number?
Yes.
You have to have a dependable number.
Right.
Mr. Chair, your number would have to be, I understand what everyone is trying to do, but the number has to be based upon some evidence within the record to support the number that is ultimately used for purposes of drafting the findings.
Okay. He did mention about that hunting land that went for $10,000 an acre, and this is kind of his front yard.
But again, he's not losing it, he's losing
Use.
use, he still
Yeah.
owns the property,
Yes.
it
Okay.
just has a different use.
Well, if you're not comfortable with it, let's just go back the way it was. That's fine.
So, just for the record, you're not making that motion then?
So the motion is as stood.
Yes.
To move forward with option 2.
Yes.
And we still have that second, is that correct, Marie? Okay. Procedurally, we are not prepared to draft all of the findings today, regardless.
Correct. I would ask that you take a final vote on the project, and then in order to be able to incorporate all of the information, both from this hearing as well as the prior hearing, we would bring those findings back to the January 7th board meeting.
Seventh.
Yeah.
January 7th board meeting for consideration.
Any other commentary? I'll call the question then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We will then proceed for drafting of
Proposed
the final
findings. Correct.
findings, which will be then reviewed and adopted at the January 7th. Is that
Correct.
correct? Is that everybody's understanding?
Yes.
Very well.
And ordinarily, we would make an effort to have those findings prepared to move forward, but given all of the information that was submitted
And
today.
I believe we still wanted to review the case that was also presented also by Mr. Franta that you got this morning.
No, I don't, I've already reviewed it.
You've already
I don't-
reviewed it, okay,
yes.
all right, so
Mhm.
we're fine, okay. Very good. Thank you all for your patience and your diligence. I believe that is the last item we have on this portion of the agenda.
Correct.
I entertain a motion to adjourn the drainage authority meeting.
So move.
We have a motion,
Second.
we have a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The drainage authority meeting is adjourned. We'll call ourselves the board meeting back to order. We have a few unfinished items, and those would be our informational items. We'll start with the chair's report. In my last official act as chair for the honor that I've served you this year, my attendance was at the MRCI board meeting. We attended universally the budget public hearing, traditionally the truth and taxation meeting. Spent time at St. Cloud for the AMC annual conference. Attended drug court graduation. Also attended and participated in the statewide emergency communication network finance committee, of which I serve. And that is all I have to report. Commissioner Kolars.
Thank you, Commissioner Kemp, and thanks again for your leadership this past year in your third year on the county board. I appreciate the work that you've done. December 5th tax meeting, the 3-day AMC annual, ATP meeting at MnDOT last Friday on the 13th, and an MDAC meeting yesterday. I'll provide that to the recording secretary.
Thank you. Commissioner Grinnell.
I had a regional board of director meeting, planning and zoning was last evening. Upcoming this week is Tri-County Solid Waste, of which I visited Recycling Sunday, and I still have it in my truck. Friday is our Brown Liquid Community Health Board, and I also attended another session of the Leading Ethnically Diverse Communities Program through the Blinders Foundation.
Super.
Fair chance.
Commissioner Morrow.
Budget and levy, along with the rest of you, as well as the AMC annual meeting, the adolescent chemical wellness advocates met with some folks on the refugee issue we talked about today. And if I could take one final second.
Please.
And Ryan, is for you as well. We've received correspondence from AMC about the DHS billing errors and counties not paying
Correct.
that amount, a position I think that we were articulate on maybe a meeting or two ago. I was just wondering if you might consider adding that item to an agenda if we have a special meeting coming
Actually, I have the letter signed already from Director Sassenberg to send off to DHS. Last meeting, I got a consensus that was the board's wishes, so she's got it in the mail and ready to go.
Well, and as we heard, Governor Walz agreed that the county should not be paying this amount.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, then I'm good.
Thank you. Commissioner Lipke.
Went to the Rural Minnesota Energy Board meeting in Slayton. Budget levy with the rest of you, Soil and Water Board, AMC in St. Cloud. Was requested to have a meeting with the regional director of the DNR and one of his lieutenants and a couple of my neighbors. That was on Friday. And I went to Mr. Hagedorn's town hall meeting, which apparently everybody knows I was there.
Thank you. We're in the front row.
It was reserved, front row.
Is that all you have, John?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your service and all your help.
Yes, thank you.
I don't think we have any meetings currently scheduled.
Friday.
Well, those are our regular meetings, but I'm just referring to commissioners meetings and conferences. We don't have anything on the agenda.
Nothing to our.
Everything is resolved until our, I believe, February for the legislative component for AMC.
Correct.
Yeah, but then we have our legislators scheduled for
January 22nd.
And then we've yet to schedule, but you have an idea for our additional meeting for informational. And we'll talk about that at the 7th, so we'll be fine there. Okay. I entertain a motion for per diems and expenses.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. That passes unanimously, I'm sorry. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion, second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you all very much for your kind
Thank you.
attention and your hard work.